Chapter 2. Music of Other Climes. Every country has its own music which has ever kept pace with its greatest human development. I might put that in a stronger way by saying that the music sets the pace, that it was, and is, the real leader of civilization, and that the growth of a nation can best be determined by its music. While the music of the present time seems to be very largely the product of the last few hundred years, without question its real beginning had its root in a remote past, for music is the very oldest of all the arts. It may be said of music that it is the very foundation on which all the other arts are built. We might go still farther and say that music is the soul of all art, that music, in its highest and best sense, comes closer to the divine in man than does anything else in life, that in its last analysis, it is a revelation of God to man. Music is, as it were, the link between divinity and humanity. The truly great composer is the most divinely inspired of all the world's prophets, and through his music he reaches far greater audiences and preaches far more wonderful sermons than the most eloquent preachers on earth have ever done. Recent discoveries made in Egypt go to show that the ancient Egyptians possessed a wonderful knowledge of music. It is believed that they had more kinds of musical instruments in their orchestras than we possess at the present time. And it is said also that they had instruments to give a full and complete expression to the sounds of nature, such as the warring of the elements, the flowing of the brooks, the soughing of the wind, and various other nature sounds. While in our orchestras we have instruments which can, to a degree, be made to produce such effects, yet they were not expressly designed for that purpose, as many of the instruments of Egypt apparently were. There are some writers who go back to the legendary continent of Atlantis and write of the music that antedated even that of Egypt, but such writing, at best, is only speculative, since there is no authentic evidence concerning it. But of the music of the ancient civilization of Egypt, there is an ever-unfolding evidence showing the wonderful progress that music had made in that country practically before the dawn of the greater part of the world's civilization. Maspero and other great Egyptologists have shown beyond all question that in an ancient past, a civilization existed in Egypt that was one of the most wonderful the world has ever known. And largely through Egyptian influence there followed another great civilization, greater than any that has appeared on the face of the earth since that time, namely, the civilization of ancient Greece. Greece, in her use of music, followed along lines similar to those of Egypt. Many of her musical instruments were like those of Egypt, and historically there can be very little question that the Greeks drew much of their fundamental musical knowledge from Egypt. The ancient Greeks were without doubt one of the most highly developed and civilized nations that have ever inhabited the earth. They were great in every department of human endeavor, great in literature and art, great in commerce and war, great in everything that pertained to mental or physical development. Practically all the civilized nations of the earth since their time have been influenced in a marked way by ancient Greek thought and art. Many things that have come to us in the present as new research would show to be only a revival of the Greek thought of bygone ages. For ancient Greece has furnished the intellectual, ethical, and artistic fundamental basis of all that is best in the civilized thought of the present. Just as, in another way, the Jewish civilization has transmitted to us its religious thought and feeling. Undoubtedly, Greece influenced the other nations in a musical way, although we have no written music of that early time. Still, all through Greek literature, we find not only reference to the purposes for which music was used, but also a full knowledge of the wonderful power that could be exercised through its use. Greek tradition makes Orpheus their greatest representative of both vocal and instrumental music. We are told that this almost god possessed the power to draw the rocks and trees from their places, and even to arrest the rivers in their courses by the influence of his wonderful voice and lyre. The Greeks looked upon him as one of the greatest pioneers of civilization. See writes of him as the father of song. We are told, too, that Orpheus was closely associated with the mystical, ceremonial side of religion. He was said also to have taught mankind the use of medicine. And when we read of the many cures effected by the Greeks through the use of music, we may well understand that he gave to music a prominent part in the healing of the sick. One of the legends told is that Orpheus and Amphion drew the wild beasts after them, made the trees and stones dance to the time of their harps, and brought them together in such a manner as to form a regular wall and enclose a great city. An English writer who lived somewhat over 100 years ago wrote, "Stripped of the fable, this story, according to general interpretation, signifies that they subdued the savage disposition of a barbarous people who lived in caves, woods, and deserts, and by representing to them in their songs the advantages of society, persuaded them to build cities and form a community." If this be true, we see the foundation of a real community of interests is to be established through the use of music. Aristoxenus, an early Greek critic of prosody, distinguished the elements out of which rhythm is composed as the spoken word, the time of music and song, and the bodily motion. And he defined rhythm so produced as an arrangement of the time periods. The art of the early Greek poets was devoted to a harmonious combination of language, instrument, and gesture, the whole three uniting to form perfect rhythm. Ages ago it was known that rhythm could be put into everything we do with the greatest advantage, so that no matter what work one may be engaged in, the rhythmic way of doing it is the easiest as well as the most graceful. Pythagoras, who lived some 650 years before Christ, and is considered one of the greatest of early mathematicians, believed that the universe was created by music. It is said he taught that not the ear, but mathematics, should be the guide in music. He was apparently one of the first Greeks to teach the music of the spheres, and had a scale in which the moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn corresponded to the notes E, F, G, A, B, C, and D, of which the Sun formed the middle or the controlling note. Thus we can see that the music of 2,500 years ago was, in one sense, derived from the heavens, and that heavenly bodies were used as symbols of musical sounds. Unquestionably, Greece laid the foundation of her civilization in music, and the other muses constituted different degrees of the one great fundamental note that ruled through all from first to last. It is music that comes through man's ear and sound, and it is music that comes through man's eye and color. Musical sound vibration and musical color vibration underlie all nature and give beauty to all life. Take music and color out of the world and we have a dead world, a world without a soul. The nation that is devoid of the musical sense, so that it neither creates nor loves music, has lost its soul. And the individual who has not awakened to a love of music and color has not yet found his soul. We feel music and color far more than we see or hear them. The greatest beauty of sound or color is a revelation to the soul of man rather than something derived through his sense nature. Greece was a great nation so long as she continued to use the divine principles of rhythm, melody, and harmony in everything she felt, thought, and did. From the time she began to lose these principles, there came a decline. But the spirit which once animated the Greek people did not die. It lives on, and will continue to live on until there shall come a civilization even greater than that of the Greeks. As Jesus was a prophecy of what man must become, so Greece was a prophecy of what the whole world shall yet become. When we write of the music of the past, let us remember that music is without beginning or ending, that it lives in the heart of the infinite, that the demand can never exceed the supply. Moreover, the world can have the music it desires if it is willing to seek it. But the things that heart and mind desire are not brought into being without an effort on the part of those desiring them. We must bring of what we have to bear on that which we desire to have. For everything we receive, there must be something in the nature of an equivalent given. We can have what heart and mind desire when we use heart and mind and bodily effort to get it. It was Plato who said, "The soul which has seen the most of truth shall come to the birth as a philosopher, or artist, or musician, or lover." It is through seeing the most of truth and expressing all that we are able to see that there comes the new birth, the new zeal, the new knowledge. Love music for the love of music. Love beauty for the love of beauty, and music and beauty will become redoubled, as it were, in your life. If we are going to secure from life all that is highest and best, then we must bring to life all that is highest and best. We cannot barter the unlovely for the lovely, or the unwholesome for that which is wholesome, the discordant for the harmonious. No, it is like that attracts like. Give all the melody that is in your life to the world, and a still greater melody will flow back into it. Give to the world the best, and give only the best, then shall you receive the best. With the decline of music in Greece, there was a long period when the progress of music seemed to have come to an end. The world came under the thraldom of the Roman Empire, and the Muses, save in the most external way, failed to prove of interest to the people. With the coming of materialism into any country, the death knell of beauty is sounded. The Roman Empire was noted for its building of wonderful roads and the carrying on of great wars, but it paid little attention to all that goes to make life truly great or beautiful. True it is that, under some of the emperors of Rome, art flourished more than it did under others. With the advent of Christianity as the national religion of the Roman Empire, it might be thought that the Christian gospel of peace and goodwill would have brought with it something of the true music of life. But there is little evidence that the change from Roman barbarism to Christian civilization wrought any marked change in the art of the day. Undoubtedly, all the persecutions and the curtailments of the religious rights of the early Christians had much to do with keeping them from expressing themselves through music. There were doubtless many other reasons besides this. The majority of them were made up of the poorer classes, and it is doubtful whether, even under ordinary circumstances, they would have been able to have expressed themselves through music. It was during the 4th century AD that Ambrose, Bishop of Milan, made the first real effort to produce church music, and he seems to have met with considerable success. Later, Pope Gregory the Great carried on still further the work begun by Ambrose. But comparatively little of what might be called good music was produced until the middle or end of the 14th century. From that time on, the growth of music is a continuous one, and Italy takes a very prominent part. Not only did she lay a new foundation of musical art, but she has continued on through the centuries without any break in her career, so that I think it may truthfully be said that the knowledge and love of music possessed by the Italians has not been exceeded by the people of any other nation in modern times. Palestrina, born 1528, may be said to be the first great master of Italian music. Certainly he was the greatest master of the pure old choral style. He accomplished far more during his life than any other previous composer had done, for he wrote many masses, hymns, madrigals, and a large variety of other works. Palestrina represents, in his music, the perfection, the flower, and the fruit of all that had gone before his time. We might say that not only does he sum up all that was highest and best that was before his time, but that he opened the way for, and gave a new impetus to, music. He resembles the painter, Fra Angelico, in the reverence, the love, and the devotion that he put into his religious music. After Palestrina comes Henry Purcell of England, who probably influenced England more, in a musical way, than any one single English composer has ever done. In his music, he had the faculty of exciting practically any kind of emotion through what might be called his magical modes of expression, so that he stands with the great minds of England, and it is doubtful if any of the songs of the present will appeal to the English ear or sympathies to the same degree as do the delightful, as well as beautiful, old songs of Purcell. After Purcell follows Johann Sebastian Bach, a very giant among composers. From his time forward, Germany takes rank with Italy as one of the two greatest music-producing countries of the world. Bach may be called the real father of German music, not that the Germans had not produced beautiful music before his time, but he laid music on an enduring foundation, and he, more than anyone else, embodies what a musical writer calls the whole essence of the German nature. He was not only a composer of the highest order, but was a great organist as well. He wrote for the instrumental musician, unlike Handel, who was born near the same time and who wrote chiefly for the voice. Bach stands supreme as the most intellectual composer of all modern times. He carries perfection and variety of form to such a degree that it is questionable whether all the great composers who came after him did not profit more through the study of his music than from that of any other composer. Someday the world at large will probably realize how much it is indebted to Bach for laying the art foundations of modern music and making it possible for those who followed him to profit by what he had accomplished. After Bach, there came a succession of bright stars in the musical firmament. The great Handel, writer of the Messiah, and other wonderful oratorios, influenced England in a musical way as no other composer has ever been able to do. And England owes a debt of gratitude to him that can never be fully repaid. After Handel, we have Haydn, whose greatest work, The Creation, is filled with religious fervor. The Italians called him the god of instrumental music and compared his sacred and splendid music to the sun in the temple of harmony. What Handel did for the development of the singing voice, and Haydn for the progress of instrumental music, Gluck did for the unfolding of the opera. Gluck was to the opera of his day what Wagner is to the opera of our day. But among all composers of great music, there is one who stands unique, as being in the closest communion with the very soul of music itself, born a composer and a musician, the divine Mozart. Though his life on earth was a brief one, he composed in those few years not only a greater quantity of music than any other musician before or since, but also produced greater varieties of rhythm and harmony than had been known up to his time. He gave to the world in his early years what other great masters of music frequently have accomplished only after years of mature experience. Mozart was like a meteor, flashing across the heavens, lighting up everything in its path. If ever music was inspired, his music was. The lover of music cannot help being impressed, in listening to the first few bars of Mozart's most beautiful music, with the idea that the composer knew the end of his composition from the beginning. It would seem that almost before he took a pen to write down a single note, the whole composition was already written in his mind. And, when he had finished his work, it was the perfected production of the master who did not need to rewrite or in any material way change the music which flowed spontaneously from his soul. I do not think that it is fair to compare Bach with Haydn, Mozart with Beethoven, Gluck with Wagner, or Schubert with Mendelssohn. Each one of these great masters was great in his own way. Each had his message for the world. Why should we try to exalt one at the expense of another any more than we should try to attribute more glory to one star than to another? Each star is beautiful in its own way. Each star has an originality all its own. It is not by making comparisons that we shall establish the truth, but rather by giving to each one due credit for all that he has done. I do not think that we can compare Mozart with any of the other great composers. There may have been others who have done their work quite as well as he did, but when we consider what he accomplished in a few short years, we are filled with wonder at the versatility he displayed to such a marked extent, and at the great amount of his musical productions. Mozart, in the musical world, for the amount of work that he was able to do, is what Rubens was in the world of painting. Both seem to have done far more than could be expected from any one single life. It is not necessary to comment on his productions, for all lovers of music know what he has done. The one comment to make is that we cannot have too much of the kind of music that Mozart composed. Just a little later comes Beethoven, another of the great tone prophets of music. His influence on the music world has been of the most lasting order. There is a strength and a beauty and, at times, a wonderful simplicity in his music. Doubtless in the ages to come, Beethoven will rank as one of the greatest composers of all times. After Beethoven came Schubert, who sang nature's sun songs while finding life very difficult to live, and who was, nevertheless, able to impart to the world more of the joy and gladness of life, more of the simplicity and beauty of it, than almost any other composer who ever lived. Mendelssohn, too, had something akin to Schubert, although his music might come under the head of a more classical order. Schubert's music seemed to gush spontaneously from his mind. To him the spirit was more than the form, but Mendelssohn was as particular of beauty of form in music as Tennyson was of beauty of form in verse. Coming down to our own period, one man stands preeminent as one of the greatest masters of all time in musical composition, Richard Wagner. He was a star of the first magnitude, and his music, notwithstanding the attention it has already received, is not yet appreciated at its true value because it is not yet fully understood. Neither Wagner nor his music is more than partially comprehended at present. The world needs perspective. In the years to come, the man and his music will both take a higher place than has yet been accorded them. A man who writes such music cannot be considered an ordinary man. What we might term his weakness may in a larger light be considered his strength. In a letter he writes to Mathilde Wesendonck, he says, "Nothing catches my eyes, the objects, the scenes to which my eyes are attracted, or might be attracted, might be the greatest in the world, but do not amuse me, and are indifferent to me. My eyes now only serve me to distinguish day from night, light from darkness. It is really a death of the external world to me, and of me to it. I see only internal images, which try to realize themselves by sounds." Elsewhere in another letter from Paris in 1861 he says, There ought to be in us an internal sense which becomes clear and active where all the other senses, directed outward, sleep and dream. It is precisely when I no longer see or hear anything distinctly that this sense is most active and is a producer of calm. I can give it no other term. Is this calm the same as the plastic calm? I do not know. All I do know is that it acts from within to without. Through it I feel myself to be the center of the world. The people who have read his autobiography and find in it what they call his supreme selfishness should take into consideration the fact that Wagner knew that he had more to give to the world than the world could possibly give to him. The message and the giving of that message was the one great purpose of his life. Anything which in any way interfered with it and held him back in the giving of it was resented by him. He was a man laboring for the good of humanity, and yet humanity put all manner of obstacles in the way of his accomplishing that good. I believe he was as all unconscious of what people call his selfishness as he was unconscious, at times, of everything but light and darkness in the outer world. The real Wagner was so intensely subjective that his outer life was the incident rather than the reality. But the one dominant thing in his life was to do the work that he felt himself inspired to do. His inner senses were all so acute that, at times, it would almost seem that Wagner not only listened to but had caught something of the music of the spheres. Critics make a great mistake when they say, as many of them do, that Wagner's music is essentially sensuous. In reality, it is nothing of the kind. Wagner in The Ring, in Tannhauser, and The Flying Dutchman, tries to bring out in a faithful way things that have their rise in the elemental and then work up through stress and storm to the higher planes of being. In the doing of this, if he is to prove faithful to his trust, he must be true to all the different phases of life that he encounters. Wagner impresses me much as the painter Turner does. Turner used in his painting dark colors to lay, as it were, the foundation of his work. Then he passes up through one color and degree of color after another, until he reaches the light. So Wagner, in his work, faithfully exemplifies each stage in the development of life, from the elemental to the purified soul, from the earth to the heaven, from darkness to light. Music has had a glorious past, but the greatest music is yet to come. With the full realization on the part of the great composer that he has consciously attuned himself to the source of all music, there will come the heavenly melodies and harmonies of which the earth has as yet only begun to dream. But dreams do come true, and when the hearts and minds of men desire still more beautiful and wonderful music than that which they have as yet received, then, because of such demand, will come the supply. Said Cardinal Newman, "There are but 7 notes in the scale. Make them 14, yet what a slender outfit for so vast an enterprise! What science brings so much out of so little? Out of what poor elements does some great master in it create his new world? Shall we say that all this exuberant inventiveness is a mere ingenuity or trick of art, like some game of fashion of the day, without reality, without meaning? Is it possible that that inexhaustible evolution and disposition of notes, so rich yet so simple, so intricate yet so regulated, so various yet so majestic, should be a mere sound, which is gone and perishes? Can it be that those mysterious stirrings of the heart, and keen emotions, and strange yearnings after we know not what, and awful impressions from we know not whence, should be wrought in us by what is unsubstantial, and comes and goes, and begins and ends in itself? It is not so. It cannot be. No, they have escaped from some higher sphere. They are the outpourings of eternal harmony in the medium of created sound. They are echoes from our home. They are the voices of angels, or the Magnificat of saints, or the living laws of divine governance, or the divine attributes. Something are they besides themselves, which we cannot compass, which we cannot utter, though mortal man, and one perhaps not otherwise distinguished above his fellows, has the gift of eliciting them. Cardinal Newman's tribute to music is not an overestimated one, as many may perhaps think, but an expression of his inmost feelings, the expression of one who was a true lover of music. I doubt very much whether any devoted lover of music by the spoken or written word can give any full or complete expression to the wonderful influence music exerts upon his life, or to the added meaning it gives to all his experiences. How often we find thoughts and words inadequate when we try to give expression to our deepest feelings. The fact is that we seem almost to lose something of the real value when we try to interpret what we feel through the written page or the spoken word. Just as I suppose the painter must feel when he sees new wonders of beauty and color in nature and tries to depict them on his canvas, and finds that his pigment colors are in no way adequate to express the beauty of color he is able to see. The whole object of life is this effort that we are constantly making to articulate the inarticulate, to express what seems inexpressible, to reveal, as it were, all the inner mysteries of being. To a degree we succeed, but in a greater degree we seem to fail. Only little by little does life render up her secrets, and then only to the seeker. But to him who continues the search will come the sure reward, because there is nothing hidden but that shall be revealed, and revelation will follow revelation. One height gained will show still greater heights to be attained. There is no final, there is no ultimate. Progress is eternal. End of chapter.